We will be back in a moment. Don't go away, but you could grab a cup of tea or coffee. We'll be right back. All right, so in the mix of all of these matters that are playing themselves out, look, people are giving different suggestions in terms of what they think can solve all of these out, but let's get to here and see which way, what suggestions might fit the bill. Mark?
Indeed, Chamberlain, the event of the last couple of days here in Nigeria, if not weeks, it would seem that no matter how hard we try to run away from this topic, the events of the last couple of weeks and days have brought it back again into sharp relief. To join us to discuss this matter this morning is Professor Rufai Alkali, who is former special advisor to the President on Political Affairs and also former Pro-Chancellor and Chairman, Federal University of Technology, Mina. Prof, you're welcome to
Thank you very much, Mofe. You're looking good.
Well, it's good to be back.
Thank you very much.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, we sincerely
hope. Congrats to channels. Congrats, you have been doing a good job.
Thank you most kindly, sir. I don't even know whether to say. I already said Happy New Year, and I was just wondering, if this year has truly started on a happy note. First, we had the carryover of the coronavirus into the year. According to some people, they say it also made the crossover into the year. But then when you look at the matters, especially with security that have also crossed over into the new year, and the conversations we're beginning to get now on restructuring, there are huge questions as to whether or not this time around the conversation is for good. Do you think that we can make progress given just how often we're talking about this topic of restructuring?
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that the debate on structuring of Nigeria is not a new one. It has been as old as the history of Nigeria itself. Indeed, I will venture to say that the history of Nigeria is the history of restructuring, because this is not the way Nigeria was in 1914 or in 1946 when the Richard Constitution was started, or in 1960 before the Republican Constitution, or in 1963 when the Republican Constitution was brought in, and after a series of changes. Now, the pattern is that the debate on restructuring has been shifting and been changing over a period of time. You may recall that before political independence, the argument that the nationalists wanted to have some regions to be created. And the option given to Nigerians then was two, either to accept independence and then you can create your state at your own convenience, or if a state is created or region is created, then it has to delay the independence. And then politicians at that time, our nationalists, they said, give us independence. And not long later, you may recall that the NPC, in alliance with the NCNC, created the Midwest region out of Southwest region. At that time, not everybody welcomed the idea because the three regions were very powerful and they wanted to run their affairs with relative strength vis-a-vis the federal government at that time. So any touch of any region was like a minus for the regions, and therefore it was seen as a minus. You may also recall that in 1966, after the coup that led to the killing of Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa and other regional leaders, the military government then introduced a unitary government, which was away from the confederal system, sort of, that was being run before then. And many people welcome it, some did not welcome it. But those who did not welcome the unitary government are the people who felt very bitter because the concentration of power completely in the federal government at that time was too much. And that's why when the second military coup took place in July 1966, one of the first things they did was to reverse that decree of unitary government to return Nigeria to a federal government again. Now, you may also recall that in 1967, just before the beginning of this civil war, the federal government again realized that the best way again is to restructure Nigeria into some states. And we ended up at that time having 12 states. So, some of the minorities at that time, they were very, very happy because they were now being freed off from the control of the hegemonic control of the major ethnic groups, so to say. So since then, more states were created, and then at one stage, it reached a point that the state creation was not an issue of ethnic or regional matter, but developmental issues.
So, Prof, I hate to cut short this history lesson because you say that this is, the history of Nigeria is a lesson or it's a history of restructuring.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The question is, what lessons are we taking from it? We've had time now to experiment with all manners of things. I mean, we've done parliamentary system of government. We have broken down even, from the regions to more states. We've done unitary. We're back in the federal government or some sort of mix of federalism with unitary. That's where it seems we are. Are we learning any lessons? And, so far so good. It doesn't look like it's working because the agitations are still there. If there's anything, they're getting even louder. And the problems also seem to be increasing. Often and often again, we always hear Nigeria is teetering on the brink. We're, playing with fire, things of the sort. Everything centered around restructuring. Are we learning any lessons from what from all that you've enumerated and where we're currently going?
I think let's take it this way. The first, Nigeria is a sophisticated country. And our old level of democracy, whether we see it as calculated in terms of 21 years since 1999 or much earlier since 1960s, the way we run our country is also more robust compared to other African countries. We are far, far ahead. And therefore, the level of conversation and debate on issues concerning Nigeria is often heated. Sometimes people see it for bad reason, but sometimes also for good reason, because out of this debate, more things keep on coming out, and the picture of a better Nigeria come out. I'm a more positive person. Now, but let me also consider that there are issues that could have been handled differently. Like I said, at some stage, the issue of state creation was a developmental matter. And that you could now, if you summarize the whole debate about restructuring, it's about 10 items or so to say. Those who want state police, state police, those who want more state created, those who want devolution of power from the federal government, those who want confederal. I'm coming to that confederal system again, rather than the federal system. Then those who are looking for resource control. And those who want the 6 zones in the country now to be given more powers. There are people who are calling for the abolition of local government. Normally, in a democracy, these are issues for debate and discussions. The only thing is that even though Nigerians have faith in democracy, but we are having difficulty having faith in our National Assembly to handle this matter. Because technically speaking, once we have an elected government, it is the structures and institutions of that we have on the ground used to be used now to aggregate all these interests. And that if the National Assembly is given that opportunity, and they've been given opportunity, if you look at the Electoral Act and other matters related to that, it was the National Assembly that made all these decisions to restructure or to reorganize or reform the Electoral Act. And now we have an Electoral Act that we can say we are fairly comfortable. That's not the end of it, and that's not a perfect document, but we are moving forward. So, but there are people who think that you can have restructuring outside the National Assembly. That's why sometimes people call sovereign national conference or national conference. And some people have been calling for outright secession, that they can have secession without just on the table like that. So it is normal for people to agitate for certain things. It's normal for them to put pressure for those issues. But in a federal system like we have in Nigeria, nobody will have everything the way you want it.
Yeah, but you've talked about how, a lot of people are saying that this should happen outside the remit of what we currently have, outside the remit of the structure of government, so to speak, especially the National Assembly, which is a major bone of contention. The National Assembly continues to say this is within our purview. But for those who say it is outside the remit of the National Assembly, might not be doing so because of a lack of faith in the National Assembly. They say that this is outside the remit of the National Assembly. And we've seen examples of that, outside of the country where, referendums have been called for and people, adults of that country have been asked to go and vote on the matter to say that this is about deciding the fate of a country, deciding the fate of a people, and everyone should have their say rather than saying they're delegating this to their representatives. What's your thoughts on that? How heavy is the importance, or how shall I say, how sacrosanct is the importance of a referendum, you know, agreed upon by the generality of the populace in deciding the future of a country like Nigeria?
Yes. Again, we are going back to the same point. But if you now jettison the role of the National Assembly, and as some people are calling, and they make a lot of sense and argument that what you need is a representation of nationalities that will now sit down somewhere and then debate on all the issues and come up with recommendations. Now, the idea is that how do you define a nationality? Is it the same thing as a tribe, or are they different? Are you dealing with all the tribes in Nigeria, or are you going to aggregate these tribes into different nationalities? Or are you saying that they're going to be represented by one person, by 10 people? Is it going to be on population, based on population? Is it going to be based on size of the land? What are you going to do? Who is going to coordinate this? In the past few years, several years, you know, we had several series of constitutional conferences and national conferences. And that ultimately, whenever they finish, there are people who feel that, well, after the constitutional conference, then it should be just adapted. Even if you are going to do a referendum, you have to agree what are the issues that will be taken to referendum. Which are those issues? Are they all the issues or some parts of the issues? Now, what we are saying here is that you must have a structure, a legitimate structure, that is it, that will now provide the base and the platform and the framework for all these debate and arguments. There's no harm with all these arguments. There's no issue. Because there are people who feel that there should be state police. But there are people, and they believe very, very strongly. But some people are saying that, look, if you look at what the state governors, for example, are doing with the state independent electoral commissions, where every state governor will ensure that where is the local government election, he will sue the entire number of local government, even council, nobody will be giving. Whether you have 10 political parties, 20 parties, nobody take anything. So by the time you give some state government, the police, they will control everything. But in any case, even now, with all sense of responsibility, I want to argue that every governor can work with a state commissioner, with director of SSS, with all other federal employees, whether they are a security or non-security agency. But the debate of whether you need a state police or not can continue. And if it is agreed that this country will need state police, so be it.
Prof, you said that there is no harm in having these conversations. For some people, you know, they'll agree entirely with you that indeed the conversations are necessary and there is no harm in having them. However, another group of people are getting more agitated and are saying, look, we've been talking forever and ever and it doesn't look like we're making much progress. It's time to take up arms. And we're beginning to see more and more extremist groups, you know, coming up and saying, you know, this is the way to go, especially when you consider the perceived injustices that continue to prevail, so to speak. You know, don't you think that we are under some sort of pressure now, some sort of hurry to say, you know, moving away from talk, this is the action that we're taking towards correcting some of the ills that we're currently seeing in society? Otherwise, there is no way, there is no stopping the gathering of followers by these extremist groups.
Well, I agree with you totally, Mwape. There is a pattern in Nigerian politics that has been there for quite a long time. And again, I must say it's not new. It's what we call politics of brinkmanship. And it's very common under civilian governments. It happens usually under very military governments. You know, most of the forces that you see that are agitating, the smaller one, the one that you're talking about, you know, coalitions together, trying to, you know, raise dust and the rest of them, some of them, they have other people behind them. And that sometimes, as a political scientist, I would say that the ruling elite should have responsibility to Nigeria and to Nigerians. And they should also remember that if, like the argument that's been made by our leaders recently in the trust dialogue, is that even if you do the restructuring, that is not the end of the argument. Because ultimately, the other issue that I mean not to be being discussed about on restructuring is what the ordinary citizen wants is that how can he have access to water in his village? How can he have access to basic health care? How can he take his children to school? How can he have security? How can he have a very big, good road to travel, bring his produce from the village to the market and then back to the village? How can you be able to have something that you can say you are now a worker, that you are having a living wage? And how can you be sure that when you retire from service, you are going to have your own retirement benefit paid on time? People are talking about basic things, about daily life. But the ruling elites, most of the time, when they see the pressure on the people on them, they divert their attention, because ultimately, even if you do the restructuring, personally, we know, most of us as political scientists, when we study in the 1970s and 80s, structural issues do not solve the systemic issues. The value in the system, the way the system operates as a whole is significantly more important than even the structures sometimes. So if people are addressing those, the very concern of the ordinary person, nobody will care whether you're running a regional system or you're running a federal government or you're running a confederal system. But when people are denied their right, they are oppressed, they are suppressed through various policies, directly or indirectly, openly or subliminally, then people begin to raise, and then they look for a reason to organize. So what we are saying here is that it is time for our ruling elite to realize that if we push our people, if you mobilize them and push them into a particular position, you cannot take them back. And that's why you end up finding people trying to arm themselves and fighting this. And everybody will be a loser in the process.
Let's quickly go to Lagos now. I understand my colleague Ayo has questions for you. Ayo.
Yes, thank you, Malkwe. Prof, in the last comment you just made, you referred to the people in leadership as ruling elites. And it just raised a question on my mind. Do we have, and then you have talked about two other words, political structure and system. So what exactly is the issue? At the beginning, you took us through, historical trajectory of where we are coming from as a people, policies of the 60s, First Republic, and all of that. So what exactly would you say the issue is that's been intractable over the years? Because it would seem like the problems are pretty much the same over the years. Is it a leadership problem, a systems problem, or a structure problem? What exactly is the issue, and what do we need to do to resolve it?
I think it's a combination of all of the above. You see, the good thing about we Nigerians is that we are not comparing with ourselves with those behind us. And it's very good. We always move ahead, we think ahead, and we plan ahead, or we should plan ahead. So Nigerians are always looking at what is happening in other parts of the world. They see what is happening in Europe. They see what is happening in the United States. They see what is happening even in Asia, even in China and other places. So there's this agitation in our mind that, look, there are certain things Nigeria should have gone beyond at this point in time. So the question people always ask is why? So there are people who believe it is the issue of structure. Therefore, maybe by the time you restructure the country, then it is possible. But the history of restructuring, like I said, in Nigeria has always been contentious. And
Prof, if you don't mind me butting in, Prof, just one moment.
Should argue it.
Prof, just one moment. I asked that question against the background of how you started, about the way leadership in the First Republic played out. The kind of policies they initiated, people-centric policies that they came up with, some of which are still subjects of discussion in political science lectures today. And people have referenced, even in the report that we played ahead of this conversation, people are still referencing that First Republic, and maybe we should go back to the parliamentary system. So that's why I was asking, that conversation is still on, whether or not, perhaps the referendum that Malkwe referenced might also, refer to that. But what exactly do we have a political structure? Because some would say, while we are talking about a presidential system of government, we don't seem to be practicing it to the letter.
That's a good one also. I think even Malkwe raised it in the introductory comments she made. There was an opportunity I had here in this same station, and I discussed the issue of parliamentary system. And I want to take a minute to explain this point again, because I fear people tend to forget what we have done in the past or what we have said in the past. Sir, Africans do not want to share power. That's the reality of life. Therefore, not only at the federal level or at the state level or at the local government, even at the level of organization, wherever you have an executive authority and a ceremonial authority, they always clash. It is all happening like that. Now, when we inherited the parliamentary system, we inherited it from Britain. In the first 3 years, from 96 to 63, the Queen was the head of state. And then Tafawa Balewa was the prime minister. But once we had the Republican Constitution, when Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who is a highly respected nationalist, who is, highly, conscious of his responsibility, like all others, like Awolowo and Sardauna and others who are conscious about the future of our country, he was the president of the country. But after that, we had started having clashes between the president and the prime minister. So what we are saying here is that the only countries that have relative stability who are running parliamentary system are those who we call the Commonwealth countries. Maybe Canada, maybe Australia, maybe New Zealand, and England itself. Because the Queen is their head of state, and she is at the background. And then the Prime Minister is the one who runs the government. And the Prime Minister must be elected. He is not elected nationwide. He's elected, so was elected among his own peers. That's why he's called Prime Minister, Primus inter pares. That is first among equals. Now, what you have is that in the country where you have this kind of system, where it's not the Queen that is the head of state, you have always political instability. If you look at what is happening in Israel, there was a time now, even now, Israel is in the state of limbo. They have to share power through so many arrangements, so many technical issues between the opposition and the ruling party, so to say. So what we are saying that in a typical African country, when you have somebody as a ceremonial president and then a prime minister, it will not work. Because the rule also is that when the prime minister must be always in the National Assembly or in the Congress to be defending every policy decision. So, and Prof, then wherever there is a lack of a majority from the National Assembly, he will have to dissolve the National Assembly or he will have to resign. And so, Prof, where tribal issues, ethnic issues, religious, it will come in.
Let me just add this so you can respond to them as well. Now, if premised on what you've said, good morning. If premised on what you said that, Africans don't like to share power, would you be suggesting then that we modify our democratic process? Because if we're to do that, how come in the 60s things appeared different than now? Isn't it about the people themselves?
No, even then there were problems because, like I said, after the 1964 election, if you may recall, there were difficulty by some forces to allow Dr. Azikiwe to invite the Prime Minister to form government. And it may look small, but it can be very big. If you look at the contention now in the United States, after running a democratic government for over 250 years, if it were a prime minister system now, they would not, up to now, would not have sorted out the trouble. So what we are saying here is that wherever you have a parliamentary system, insofar as a Commonwealth system where the Queen is outside, or if you are able to get somebody, a Nigerian, who will be willing to play the role of a president, that become different. But let us also look at what has been happening in two countries, Turkey and Russia. You find that the same person will be a prime minister today. After a while, he will change the constitution and become the president tomorrow. After a while, he will change the constitution to become a prime minister today. These are two cases where you have, they are running between parliamentary system and then presidential system. Turkey and Russia, because they are very strong, they'll be able to suppress all the internal forces. But if you know what happened in Turkey in the past few years, it was very violent before the COVID stabilized.
I'm wondering, though, looking at the crisis we seem to be in right now, do you think that restructuring has any role to play? Or you look at the security issues which we are battling with today?
Well, I don't know. I don't want to deny the fact that Nigeria is under serious strain. But it is our choice to say it is crisis. But if something that's been there with us for the past 20, 30 years, 40 years, as far as the issue of structural government, you cannot call it a crisis. Maybe it's a crisis of perception, maybe a crisis of attitude, maybe a crisis of interest. But the system has a way of balancing interest. And for example, what I'm saying is that even if you want to do restructuring, you have to do it through reconciliation, accommodation, and everybody will have his own interest accommodated. But if somebody insists that I want it this way and this way alone, in a federal system, it will not work. So
I'm sorry to
maybe I did not get you
interrupt
right.
you. We have to go on break here. So
Okay,
when
fine.
we come back,
Okay.
we will definitely let you finish your thoughts, Prof.
Sure.
Please stay with us. Professor Rufai Alkali, former special advisor to the President on Political Affairs and former Pro-Chancellor and Chairman, Federal University of Technology, Minna, is still with us in our Abuja studios, and we're talking about restructuring. Prof, you're giving us your closing thoughts on the matter, especially with regards to the current security situation. And you seem not to be so alarmed. You seem to be almost used to it. I think you think it's some brinksmanship. Is that really what it is?
It is. Because there are certain things that ought to have been allowed to work easily, but they are not being allowed. Even if you look at it, there are some states who are saying they are talking about a state police. I talked about it before. And they're agitating. Some of them may be even the people in power that are agitating for this state police. But now when there is effort, or their effort, to liberate the houses of assembly, to give them direct access to their money, and local government, they blocked it. And then some are even calling for the abolition of local governments. The creation of local governments has brought government much closer to the people. But depending on individual states, but generally, one can say that most local governments have collapsed. So you find that the small thing that the local government used to do, knowing the security situation in the local government, knowing how to mobilize funds for the state, knowing how to manage traditional issues, land issues, everything has been concentrated. And I think why most Nigerians are worried, and I think it's justified, is that gradually more power and more authority is being concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. And that instead of diffusion, where people will be involved, there is concentration and non-inclusion. And that, Aristotle once said that if an able statement out of job is like a huge whale, he will endeavor to overthrow the ship of state unless he given an empty cast to play with. If you look at the political tribe that has been created since 1999 or 1998, how many governors, how many National Assembly members, how many senators, how many ministers, how many ambassadors, most of them, no government can accommodate them. And some of them have role to play at the local government level, or at their own state level, or at the international level. But if everybody is now constrained to sit down and be watching TV and counting his days, people will feel agitated. So lack of involvement of people who know the system, who understand the system, who are capable of assisting the system, both for development issues, both for security issues, makes people more angry, and they come up with all kinds of ideas and the rest of it. So I think we have to defreeze the environment. The tension is built because there is a lot of this sense of people feel that they are outside the system. When they
defreeze the environment, how?
Well, I am saying that, how do I put it? Why I'm saying that when you concentrate power and authority in fewer and fewer hands, let's say, for example,
I understand what you're saying. Okay. The question is, how do we do it?
No,
quickly.
I want to give you an example.
Because we're almost out of time.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have the National Council of States. Occasionally, they have a role to play advising Mr. President on doing certain things. We have 36 states in the country, plus Abuja. In all these states, we also had former governors, former commissioners of police, former chief judges, former directors of SSS. If you can even invite them, some of them, occasionally, maybe within a system, to be advising government in those states where they served, whether they are indigenous of this state or they are not indigenous who are there, they will be able to advise government at a less cost what they themselves saw when they were there in those positions and what is happening now. And then with the benefit of this information, you can also do certain things for yourself. So what I'm saying is that there are so many people who know a lot about the country, but if you don't invite them to assist you, they will keep quiet even if they see certain things going wrong. So what I'm saying, the concentration of authority, concentration of power is why now. And I think Professor Jega also mentioned the issue of this devolution of authority from the federal government. You see, the trouble again is how to balance. Do we want strong regions or strong federal government? Everyone has its own pluses, has its own minuses. During the 1960s, which we celebrate often, is that when the regions were very powerful, some of them even take foreign policy decisions without notifying the federal government. And then sometimes what you call the centrifugal forces were very powerful because the regions were in charge of their resources. And there are people who will support this. I personally will support that kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with resource control. After all, everybody has the resources to utilize for the benefit of some people. If we are talking about resource control for the benefit of the people, not for the benefit of the elite alone. So I think we have to look at what are those functions of the federal government that can be performed by the state government. They should be taken back to the state government. so that the state government also will be able to also carry the local government along with them. Because you cannot insist the federal government give you more powers, and then you also take away the power from the federal government and take powers from by local governments. Especially the finances of local government should be taken to the local governments. I believe in this one because it will be part of the defreezing of the environment. Councillor has nothing to do now. Chairman of local government has nothing to do. And so people are just floating around. And then we are now saying that we have problems and we have solutions to the problem. We don't want to pursue the solutions.
Well, let's hope that it will be more than talk, Prof. I sincerely hope that, you know, some of the challenges that we're facing, we get to work and see how we can handle them. But we have to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Professor Rufai Alkali is former special advisor to the President on Political Affairs and former Pro-Chancellor and Chairman, Federal University of Technology, MENA. And he's speaking with us here in our Abuja studios.